Welcome into the Take the North podcast presented by Odyssey. I am Dan Wiederer, pleased to be joined today by WGN Bears reporter, anchor extraordinaire, friend of the podcast, Kaitlin Sharkey. Kaitlin, how you doing?
Good to see you, Dan. Good to talk to you.
Always good to chat. We're coming off of a Bears victory on Sunday, 24-18 over the Rams. I was deeming it the Oxygen Bowl heading into the game because I felt like the winner would get to take that big, deep breath and go, okay, we get to reset with a win and not have to go into crisis mode, which we're all too familiar with early in the season in Chicago. Obviously, you were there Sunday. You were in the locker room. You felt some of that relief. What were your initial impressions of not only the victory, but kind of the reaction in the locker room?
I think relief is a great word because that's what I felt. I felt like this team understood the urgency of, listen, if we don't get it together here in week 4 in these winnable games against these beatable teams, then all of a sudden the thoughts start creeping in and were the expectations legit? Like, even as a player, like you're a human being, you're thinking like, wait, are we not what we thought we were? So there was definitely a sense of relief. But I think looking ahead and moving forward, like big picture, you're like, okay, a win is a win. And, you heard several players talk about 2-2 feels a lot better than 1-3, but there's still so much work that needs to be done for this team.
I'm with you across all those fronts. I do think that the difference psychologically of being 2-2 versus 1-3 is pronounced. And you could feel it Sunday afternoon. You could feel it again Monday afternoon. And the Bears understand what's ahead of them, but at least they get to do that without feeling like the season is circling the drain. A year ago, we knew where they were after 4 games. 0-4, the season was all but lost, and it was crisis mode for certain. So to be at 500 with a couple of winnable games coming up before your bye, you get a chance now to kind of troubleshoot in a way that gives you a little bit of wind at your back. I think the relief that we both felt was following the tension we both felt last week. During week 4, it was a very odd week 4 with all of the sentiments that were expressed inside that building and in the locker room in particular. What did you make of not only the urgency that really bubbled up early in the week, but the willingness of so many people inside the organization to kind of publicize the state that they were in throughout week 4?
I think it was really interesting. And I know we're not drawing comparisons to last season, but it was almost like a year to the date that we had Justin Fields standing around his locker clarifying his comments on coaching and styles of coaching and schematic things. And then all of a sudden it's like you flash forward to this year and we have Shane Waldron talking about, I need to be better on this. And there's certain play calls. And then Mercedes Lewis is standing at his locker telling us that he wants to be coached and the coaches need to coach. And I just had this kind of like whiplash deja vu, like, wait a minute. Like, is there something to this more than just like, here's a different quarterback. This is a completely different team. I don't always think that it is as different as everyone likes to think that it is now in 2024. But I did think the comments, the accountability was there. I appreciate that. I appreciated the transparency about what needs to be better. But you want to continue to see the strides being made, because it's one thing to say we need to be better, we need to be coached, we need to take some accountability. But to see it continue through now the next couple stretch of games, especially before the bye, is going to be the most telling part of it all.
You mentioned the September 2023 I guess whatever that was, saga. We'll call it a saga or whatever that was. Not only almost a year to the date, but almost in the exact same location that Justin was in the locker room clarifying his comments was where Mercedes Lewis was standing, giving us his sort of unfiltered thoughts last Thursday. And I thought some of those thoughts were very profound. They were very to the point. They're from obviously a captain of the team, a respected leader in the locker room. They were also very open. And I was curious how the Bears would respond to all of that. I went into the season and I bumped their win total from 9 to 10 because I had a very strong confidence in the state of the locker room and the way that the leadership in that room seems prepared to handle struggle and seems prepared to take ownership of some of the things, maybe more so than they have in previous years. But then I picked the Rams on Sunday because of the things that happened last week. They were kind of jarring, where you thought, like, this is a team that doesn't believe in itself right now. And they're really kind of desperately trying to find the answers. And it's not that they didn't believe in the talent and the ability that they have, but there was something loose inside the building that needed tightening. And I didn't think they were going to get it done. Obviously, they did enough to get one of those survive and advance wins Sunday. But I'm sure you felt similarly, where you're like, man, I don't know if this thing is as together as it needs to be at this point of the year.
No, and I certainly don't want to be negative for anybody in life in general, but like especially we got a lot of season left to cover, Dan. So I don't want to take it to a negative perspective, but that's exactly what I feel. You said it. They did enough. And I have no doubt that they don't have character, leadership, a great culture inside that building. We see it, right? It's definitely a different culture. And we've talked about it before the season even started. I have no doubt that they don't have leaders and people that will vocalize some concerns or accountability. But then it's like you watch the product on Sunday and you're wondering like, that first half was pretty atrocious from an offensive standpoint, especially when you're talking about these veteran playmakers and connecting with their quarterback. And, I started to like, your head starts spinning when you're in the press box and these things are going wrong, but you're like, does Caleb Williams have any chemistry with anybody outside of Rome Odunze and sometimes Cole Kmet? Like that started circulating in my mind. And, is Roshan Johnson, should he be running back one? And maybe they were using DeAndre Swift wrong the entire time. And I will credit Shane Waldron for making adjustments, especially in 4th and goal situations.
Yeah.
I was happy that we did not see a speed option, but I the whole time I'm like, I am not convinced, especially with the state of this O-line right now, that it's enough, right? There's progress being made. Sure, it's great. It's wonderful. But again, you take those takeaways away, that Montez Sweat with the strip sack and Jaquan Brisker with interceptions, and you're like, I'm not sold yet. I'm not sold on this team, Dan.
I love it, Kaitlin, because you're speaking like you've been on the beat for 20 years here, and you've adapted that very necessary see it to believe it mentality of 1 week isn't enough. You troubleshot it very well in week 4. Well, now you've got to take a very vulnerable opponent in week 5 and beat them and carry some of this momentum forward as you're still trying to discover yourself. They're clearly trying to discover themselves right now. And the number of direct shots that were taken on Shane Waldron last week, we even starting after the Colts game where Caleb Williams stood up at Lucas Oil Stadium and said, like, we need more communication. We need to be on the same page. And it was really almost I don't want to say a cry for help, but whatever one level less than that is in regards to saying, like, we need to find an offensive identity that suits the way we want to play as players. And it felt like that was what a lot of week 4 was about, was trying to find those things. You hear Cole Kmet stand up on Monday after the win over the Rams and say, with great glee, that he felt like there was a lot of violence on tape in the running game, which I think that there was sort of like a, please, Shane, let us run the ball with like a physical mindset here and start to get downhill and do some things that allow us to unlock a play style that will benefit everybody in the offense. And it was just really interesting. Shane's, one of his greatest gifts, according to people who have been around him, is his ability to adapt. Well, now is your opportunity to continue adapting, because clearly what was happening for the first 3 weeks of the season wasn't on the same page as the players, and it wasn't sinking in.
Yeah, and I think when you watch the rest of the NFL and the rest of the schedule for this Bears team, you look at, I mean, even watching the Lions and Seahawks on Monday night, I'm watching that game going, the Bears are so far from this. And I know fans don't want to hear it, I think that it's the reality of the situation. And I understand that the Bears and the Lions are certainly in different spots right now, but they're so far away from explosive plays and those fun trick plays where Jared Goff is catching touchdown. Like, they are so far from any of that kind of speed, momentum, rhythm in the offense still. And I think, sure, they made strides, and Caleb delivered a dime of a ball to DJ Moore in the back of the end zone, and those things started to look better. And the run game certainly looked more violent and better. But you just think like there is a huge gap yet. And when you're talking about how tough the NFC North is and how tough the rest of their schedule is, it's going to come down to a shootout, because that defense, as strong as they are not going to be able to just hold this for how many more weeks of the season.
So a couple things I want to talk about on the defensive side. Number one is just Jalen Johnson, because he's been the voice of that group for a while, and it's really refreshing to hear how candid he can be. And so he said some things after the game about the need for urgency inside that building. And he said, look, like, people can rationalize struggle with how we got time. And his response to that was, now, we're never going to have this group assembled the way it is now. And so we can't fall into that complacent mindset of we've got time to figure it out. It's got to be, no, we got to figure it out now. And I appreciate that from one of the more driven and competitively edgy guys in that locker room to vocalize that, knowing that his unit and his side of the ball is doing their job, right? And saying, look, like, we're not going to be able to play high level defense forever. No. So come meet us, while we're on our own run. 10 consecutive games now, the Bears held an opponent to 21 points or fewer. but they're almost raising their hands and going, Coach, hold on a second. Like we need an offense that can catch up so that this season can have the relevance we hope it has.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, working on a group project and you're not doing anything and the group gets an A. Well, the A is because of the defense. And I feel like, and God forbid, I hope that, knock on wood, everyone stays healthy, but that's always a concern so early into the season. So you need so many things to line up. And I think when Jalen Johnson speaks about urgency, that's the point he's hitting on, right? Like you only have the health, is not guaranteed week to week or practice to practice. And just the momentum and things like that and the strength of schedule at that point in the season. So there needs to be urgency in the fact that the offense can approach it and can have this mindset of like, hey, we won. Like I've covered teams, north of the border in Wisconsin that said, hey, a win's a win. And it was a very different mindset of like, hey, it doesn't matter if you win, win pretty or win ugly, but like, the Bears don't have that luxury for them, especially this season and with the rookie quarterback. So you can't approach each week like we just have to do enough. Like, no, you have to go out there and try to score 45 points each game just to be sure. Yeah.
Colt Kmet said something outside immediately after the Colts game where he said, we got better, but better isn't good enough. And I thought that, again, that's the mindset. I love hearing it from the leaders in that locker room because too often – better has been good enough here at Haugh, and they just shrug and they say, "Oh, we're moving in the right direction," and it's moving in the direction towards sustained mediocrity, which this organization has mastered forever, and they've got to figure out how to get over that hump. Jalen also called for ownership from the coaches in multiple forums, whether it was last week or again after the game on Sunday and Monday, of saying like, if you're a coach and you put us in a poor position, you got to take accountability for that too. And so there's a little bit of this tug of war going on right now that Matt Eberflus seems to think is very healthy for his football team. And he seems to think that player coach back and forth is in a really good spot right now. But I think your radar is going off like mine is and saying, well, let's just keep an eye on this. Just because you beat the Rams 24-18 doesn't mean all is well. You're one bad loss against an opponent that you should beat away from returning to that very same state of crisis.
Right. And if Andy Dalton comes in next week, and I'm not saying he's going to shred the Bears defense necessarily, but it's just each week it presents new challenges. And what I saw on tape, I mean, to this point of the season, the offense is not explosive in any way. And it still doesn't have an identity. Yes, they're taking steps forward and they had a much better balance of run and pass against the Rams, but it's certainly not, I can't be like when someone asks like, what is the Bears offense or who, I mean, you look at the box scores after and you're like, Keenan Allen had how many yards? DJ Moore had how many yards? DeAndre Swift led your receivers in receiving yards. I mean, it's just one of those things where it reminds you of Justin Fields always leading the team in rushing yards, like certain people in the wrong spots in the box score. And to me, that always, I mean, you should have a consistent 100-yard receiver and you should have like, those are like staples of good rhythmic offenses. And I just don't think the Bears are there yet.
Well, and you've got this situation right now where my radar is going off a little bit with the chemistry between Caleb and DJ. You've got that play at the end of the first half that seems like it's a sure touchdown. I've tried to ask multiple people to try to understand exactly what Caleb saw and what DJ saw and what Matt Eberflus saw and what went wrong. And you just get these kind of vague answers about time on task and we just got to get on the same page. But there's been 4 or 5, maybe 6 instances through the first month of the season where Caleb and DJ are doing completely different things. Caleb's throwing the ball here, DJ's over there, and you're going, well, what's wrong here? And is this a hint at something larger? Because DJ Moore just hasn't seemed to be DJ Moore through the first month of the season.
No, and I mean, as a vet, and he's done a lot of losing, unfortunately, not to his, performance, but like a lot of losing in his career. And I'm sure the frustrations are real. The patience is being tested. He joked with us last week that it's like right below, hitting the mark. But I think the trouble when I hear things like we're just not on the same page, I think to myself, you're in week 5. You're going into week 5 now. You've had all off season. You guys, the throwing sessions that were going on before Caleb Williams was even quarterback of the Chicago Bears. So think how long ago that was. How are you guys not on the same page? That to me is more concerning because it's clear to see he has chemistry with Rome Odunze, and Rome is just a rookie receiver trying to navigate everything he needs to do to make specific plays. But it is so disjointed with DJ, and it's, and Keenan's first game back, but again, you brought in Keenan Allen for a reason. So it takes certainly it affects a defense and how they scheme and attack an offense, but I'm looking at these. I'm like, what I forgot Keenan was even out there.
Right. You need the production to match the reputation at some point, and you go forward. A month ago, before the season started, when you joined us the last time, we were talking about how impressed we were with Caleb's lead up to the regular season and how he approached everything and how he seemed to be in a good frame of mind heading into the start of his rookie year. We're a month into it now. He's had a little bit of a roller coaster, and you could argue that his performance on Sunday against the Rams was better than the one where he threw for 363 against the Colts the previous week, just because he seemed to understand the game dynamics and seems to be getting more comfortable with each week. I'm wondering what you're seeing from him, because it does feel like, while it hasn't been a breakthrough yet, that there has been tangible strides forward in his feel for the NFL game.
Yeah, he's definitely, I feel like he's reading defenses better. He's understanding what he needs to do, his responsibility, in and out of the huddle, and then the turnovers. And that was the biggest thing from week 3 to week 4. Like, you cannot turn the ball over that many times as a quarterback, because then you become a liability. It doesn't matter how great you thread the needle. It doesn't matter how many yards you throw per game, but if you're turning the ball over consistently. So I think that was the biggest step for him, just realizing, taking care of the football, making those decisions to not put your team in a bad spot because you're trying to play hero ball, so to speak. And I think the biggest adjustment for him is coming into a situation in the NFL and realizing he can't play hero ball when a play breaks down, and he can't just scramble quickly or make this move like he did in college. And I think a lot of guys think, yeah, of course not, I can't do that. But to actually go through the plays in the moment when they're happening and go, well, I used to just roll out to my left and throw it across the field and somebody was there. And now that he can't do that, I think he's more conscious and thinking about that when he's in these moments. But he can throw the ball. I think that's the great revelation, right? He's got incredible arm talent.
No question. And there's this fear with young quarterbacks that as you teach them to be smart, that you don't teach them to be overly cautious. And you have to really be very delicate with that as a coaching staff to figure that out. And so I was really encouraged on the play before the DeAndre Swift touchdown run that he made one of those layered throws over the middle to Cole Kmet, fitting it over the top of a linebacker that he described after the game. He saw that he was flat-footed, and he knew that he had a throw there, and he knew that linebacker from the Rams was shorter than Tremaine Edmonds is, who he tries to squeeze balls over every day in practice. And so it was one of those throws where Cole Kmet described it on Monday as NFL open, and for the quarterback to recognize what NFL open was, to understand that he can trust his arm to make that throw. That made me feel a little bit better, because the last thing you want to see here is a football team that's trying to coach Caleb to be smart, suddenly taking away some of his great gifts as a quarterback. And so I want to see one per quarter where you go, okay, he's got it. He can play smart, but also not just totally sit on the football and just be in a total mind frame of don't make mistakes instead of let's go attack the defense.
Yeah, and I think understanding and trusting your receivers, and that comes with chemistry. And I do think he has it with Cole, and it was good to see that trust there in that situation, that Cole's going to go up and get that ball. And I think he just needs to continue to work on that with DJ Moore, because DJ Moore can be an incredible asset to him on the field in those certain situations. So, because they're eventually going to take Cole Kmet out of the scheme. They're going to figure, the more Caleb Williams plays, the more tape, of course, you give to opposing defenses. So I think already now teams are putting together okay, these are his tendencies, where first couple of weeks of the season, they have college tape, but they don't know what NFL quarterback Caleb Williams looks like. So I think that's going to have to continue to grow, because these defenses are going to understand and start to figure Caleb out.
The good news is, and we'll get to this in a minute, is that the Carolina Panthers come in this weekend with another bottom 5 running defense, a defense that hasn't been able to rush the quarterback, a defense that's been terrible on third down, terrible in the red zone. And so you see another opportunity to take advantage of a weaker opponent. Now, what you have to do is make sure that you don't think to yourself, oh, this is a weaker opponent. They're just going to be a walkover. Because I think the Las Vegas Raiders did that 2 weeks ago, and the Panthers stunned them, and Andy Dalton threw all over them, and they couldn't stop anything. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, the Panthers just kicked our butt. So the Bears can't fall into that false sense of confidence, thinking that they're on a different tier of the NFL than they are. They're not that far away from the Panthers. And so they've got to realize that. Before we get more into that, I'm curious how juiced up you were when you saw a rookie punter have an afternoon like the rookie punter had on Sunday at Soldier Field.
I love it. I love watching him punt. I think it's so great. I mean, you just, in your head, you hear Tory Taylor telling Caleb Williams, you're not gonna have to punt that, or Caleb telling him you're not gonna have to punt that much. And now it's like, well, thank God he can punt at 66 yards because he is a huge weapon. And for a team that like you said, is kind of middle of the road right now in the NFL, that is when the importance of the punter becomes huge, right? Like, it's like, okay, some teams have their quarterback as their weapon, and Caleb's certainly not there yet in terms of like what's their most dangerous asset. Right now, it's Tory Taylor in this defense. And I think the way he's just handled everything, step in, do my job, like he's just, I mean, it's so fun to watch. It's so fun to watch.
That dude's got an edge about him. It's pretty infectious, and it's pretty cool to see. And you hear all the time in this league about complimentary football, and sometimes it's just a cliche. But with this Bears team, it's a very real thing. If you can't rely on your offense to go score you 30 points every once in a while, you just need them to get you in a spot where your punter can then pin the other team down. Yeah. Nobody loves a punt and pin better than Matt Eberflus, and Tory Taylor seems to be made for Matt Eberflus. And look, like I know you go out on the golf course frequently, maybe more than I do. When they drafted Tory Taylor, they talked about him having multiple clubs in his bag. And in the fourth quarter the other day, he hit the driver, and then he hit a lob wedge, and he did both of them with tremendous accuracy and precision. It was really cool to watch.
Yeah, it's kind of effortless. And I think we've seen him do it. We see him in practice all the time. It'll catch my eye when we're, watching something else in practice. I'm like, what did Tory Taylor just do? Like he just, pinned it down to the one over there. And I think that's been the biggest for him, consistency in the game moments. Cause again, this is his first time at all of this as well, at the NFL level. So keep going, Tory. You're making the team proud. That's for sure.
There's no question. And he puts them in an advantageous situation, and you've got a defense then that can close. I love the mentality of that group where they're not thinking, oh man, Matthew Stafford's got the ball with the chance to go win the game. It's who's going to make the play to seal this for us. And that mindset right now, it's as sharp as it's been since 2018. And I think it's going to be something that they're going to need here in the coming weeks. We got 2 more games before that bye week. And, if the Bears can win both of them, all of a sudden you go into self-scout week with not only the momentum, but just some of that belief that will start to swell that's been so sorely lacking forever.
Yeah, you don't want to limp into the gauntlet of your schedule, and you don't want to come out of your bye week going, oh man, like now who do we have to face? And if we couldn't even handle these 2 teams, like what's next? And that is just such a toxic, hard mindset to be in, especially for the younger players on the team. And this defense, I mean, they're just so smart how they play. They just don't get rattled by anything, like even Jaquan Brisker talking about his penalties. And then he was like, it wasn't a penalty, but I moved on. And like, they just have such a switch on them. And even Montez Sweat, for the way he just like he has such a unique personality. He's probably one of the most, I never know what we're going to get when we walk up to talk to Tez or what kind of version we're going to get of Tez day to day, but he is too like such a valuable piece and worth the price of admission because he takes advantage of the mismatches. And I'm sure he's looking at the next 2 weeks on the schedule going, all right, I'm ready. Let's get going here.
Let's go attack. So the very last thing for you, it is Panthers week, and the number of storylines that will encounter us when we get out to Ellis Hall for Wednesday's availability. You've got DJ Moore playing against his former team for the second time in 2 years. You obviously have the subplot of the trade. The Panthers went all in to get Bryce Young. He's already benched a month into his second season, and all of a sudden the Bears have this entire gift basket of players and picks and everything else that's still available to them from that trade because the Panthers identified a guy that they couldn't live without, and then somehow the Bears stumbled into the player that they couldn't live without as part of it. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and I think the storylines alone, there's so much intrigue, and it's just kind of how the NFL works and how these pieces and things fall into place. And obviously the Panthers are in a very tough situation right now. And I think they're glancing over at the other sideline going, well, they certainly won that one. Ryan Poles is already 1-0 against the Panthers all time undefeated. So the thing the Bears can't do is then come out flat or come out, like you said, underselling their opponent and then be embarrassed because of all the storylines, that will be the resounding one leaving Soldier Field on Sunday if they drop the ball against the Panthers. Like no one will care. No one will care if they did this or that. You just don't want, those are those situations throughout the season where you're like, just come out sharp like you're playing a Super Bowl bound team.
Last week I called it the Oxygen Bowl. This week might be the Red Rifle Revenge Rivalry.
Yes. I love it. I mean, good for Andy Dalton. And I'm sure he's also thinking like, this is my opportunity to go out there. And I mean, I don't think he's motivated by, the Bears or anything that like, that's not for him. But yeah, it's always fun to watch, Andy Dalton, because you never know what you're going to get.
I did like that when I asked Jalen Johnson what he remembered about practicing against Andy Dalton. He said a bunch of interceptions, so it's just a very Jalen Johnson-esque comment to make as they go into a very pivotal week here for the Bears.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it'll be fun, but just like you said, pivotal. And again, I am not down on the Bears. I'm not negative on the Bears. I just want to clarify that as we close, but. Yeah, it's just we need more. There still needs to be more that has to be accomplished before I can rise them up my power rankings, I guess.
So David Haugh and I are all about T-shirt slogans, and I think you just gave us one there. I'm not down on the Bears on the back. We need to see more. Like that's it. It's where they are heading into October of 2024, and obviously we'll be there every step of the way. This week at Soldier Field, the following week in London. Kaitlin Sharkey, thanks as always for jumping on and joining us. Always a great conversation. That's Kaitlin Sharkey. I'm Dan Wiederer. Remember to like, subscribe. Join us every week, multiple times for the Take North podcast. For Kaitlin Sharkey, I'm Dan Wiederer. Great talk. See you out there.